Good evening. I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Nice to be here with you for my weekly internet show. I want to talk tonight specifically about the young people involved in the libertarian movement and young people in general. In fact, my remarks are generally going to be addressed to you, the people that are, teens, 20s, early 30s, and of course, generally to the entire libertarian audience or to anybody else that happens to listen to this broadcast. But, a lot of the young people are now growing up in a society in which, the president is assassinating people is a normal thing, torturing people, occupations of foreign countries, the war on terrorism. And so these kind of things are as normal to people that have grown up with them that, were like 8 or 9 years old when 9/11 happened, as it's normal for those of us this age to look at the national security state and consider it's normal. It's just, an essential feature of American life. The giant military industrial complex, the domestic welfare state, public schooling, the drug war, those of us that are, from, 35 to 70 or so and beyond. We've all kind of grown up on this welfare warfare state. But what's interesting about, many young people now is that they've grown up in knowing nothing but assassination, torture, war on terrorism, TSA body scans and searches and illegal searches in secret, in people's homes and businesses, and they don't know any different. And so, it's important sometimes that we step back and we reflect on what's going on here, because if we don't do that, we fall into this trap that, this is all normal. Oh, it's just necessary. It's unfortunate. Oh gosh, the poor president, he's up there having to look at the assassination list every week and, struggling on who he should add and who he should take off it and who he's going to have his CIA and military forces knock out this week. And, it's tempting to just think, gosh, this is just a normal way of life. This is what a free society does. Well, the fact is, it's not normal. It's not normal at all. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre that you've got a president of the United States, democratically elected, that is up there in the Oval Office or wherever else he meets to determine who's going to be assassinated. And he's got his little team of, Pentagon people and CIA people, and they call that due process. The fact that they deliberate over it, the military, the people are doing the killing. The fact that they deliberate on who's going to be on the list and who's not going to be on the list, it's just so shocking. They call that due process. Well, this is bizarre, and it's not normal. It's aberrant. It's just a weird way of life. Okay, the normal way of life is where your president has limited powers, and those powers don't include the power to go out and kill people. And you don't, and you have a president doesn't have the power to torture people. Now, of course, the president doesn't do the assassinating himself. He doesn't do the torture himself. He's got troops. That's what the troops are there for. The military. That's what the CIA is there for, to carry out his orders loyally and faithfully. And so, it's tempting to think, well, gosh, we're just sort of saddled with this way of life. That's what they sort of said on 9/11. That, oh my gosh, the terrorists have struck. It's sort of like the flu. The flu has struck America. Terrorism has struck America. It's come to our shores, and oh my gosh, we have no choice but to adopt these dictatorial powers. And they really are dictatorial powers. If you look at like the military dictatorship in Egypt, those are the powers that the Egyptian military council has, and the president of the country. Round people up, Egyptian citizens, cart them away to prison. Don't give them a trial. They're terrorists, okay? And torture them, execute them, These are the powers that are inherent to a dictatorship. And those are the powers that came with 9/11. Now, granted, the powers had been exercised prior to that. People think, oh, the president's just now assassinating people now. Nonsense. The assassinations go back to the roots of the national security state. After World War II. For example, when they invaded Guatemala, to institute a coup there that would oust the democratically elected president and install a military dictatorship there. This U.S. supported coup that was supporting, the people from Guatemala that were invading the country. It was designed to oust a democratically elected president from office under guise of national security. And the guy got out early. He was really lucky. His name was Jacobo Arbenz, but they had contingency plans to assassinate him. They went through several years of assassination attempts on Fidel Castro, the president of a country. No matter how brutal a dictator he is, no one can deny that Cuba never attacked the United States, not once. No terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, no assassination attempts of U.S. officials, and yet U.S. officials were invading Cuba, trying to assassinate Castro, and there's numerous other instances, and so this assassination business goes back a long way. But 9/11, it was just sort of all brought to the surface. It was just sort of by decree. The president says, I now wield these powers. He didn't say I'm a dictator, but he says I got all the powers that, are inherent to dictatorship. And so young people, that were 9, 10 on 9/11 or something, they're now, 18, 19, 20 years old. And so, they're tempted to think, when they're trying to select between President Obama and Mitt Romney, it's like, oh my gosh, which one's going to be the better assassin? And which one do I want to trust with this power? And which one, will torture people more efficiently? And which one will torture the right people? And so the whole debate becomes not only who's going to be a better job creator in chief, but who's going to be the more efficient torturer and assassin through the armed forces, through the CIA, and so forth. Well, what I'm here to tell you is that this is not normal. Okay, this is not a free society. A free society, it does not have the government going out and assassinating people and pondering over who's going to be assassinated and struggling over who's going to be added to the list. This is just in torture. This is all aberrant. Now, the government's position, of course, is that, and this was on 9/11, that we don't have anything to do with this, the government says. That torture has struck us like the flu. And golly, unfortunately, we now have to, assume these dictatorial powers. They didn't even go to Congress to ask for these dictatorial powers. They just assumed them. They said, well, we're at war now, you see, because the terrorists have struck us like the flu. We didn't have a choice in this thing, brought to American shores. And so, oh, by the way, it's going to last forever, or at least, 5 or 6 generations, major transformation in American life. We've got to exercise these dictatorial powers. I've got to, be able to round up Americans if the contingency presents itself. This is all just inanity. And this is what we libertarians were saying, is that there is a cause that is associated with all this. This is not like the flu, okay, where the flu strikes somebody, terrorism striking the nation. This is all idiocy. This is government propaganda in its purest form. There is a cause of the problem. And it's very important for young people to realize that. It's important for every American to realize it. There's a root cause. And guess what that root cause is? Yes, the U.S. government. That's the cause of the problem. More specifically, its policies and its programs are the cause of the problem. Now, isn't that convenient? The government causes the problem and then says, oh, wait. Well, no. We don't have anything to do with this. No. We have to assume dictatorial powers. We have to have government spending going out through the roof, debt going through the ceiling. We got to have all this, status junk because we just don't have a choice. The terrorists are here. Well, the fact is that the government is the root cause of the terrorist problem. And what I'm referring, of course, is to what the government does in its overseas affairs. I'm referring to the national security state. We call that because we call it that because it's to show you that system, the national security state, was not what the framers had in mind when they brought this government into existence. This is a newfangled system. Well, it's been in existence several decades now, but it's not the kind of system that the founding fathers wanted for this nation. It came into existence after World War II. It consists of a gigantic military empire, a CIA that has the power to engage in coups, assassinations, regime change operations. I mean, this giant, monstrosity, roaming the world with the objective of protecting national security. Now, you might say, what's national security? It'd be a great question, because there's no definition to it. It means whatever they want it to mean. That whatever they do, all they got to do is say national security, and that's it. They are the determiners of what national security means and what it does and what the ramifications are. So this whole system came into existence. Giant military, giant empire all over the world, bases in hundreds of countries. A CIA engaged in all kinds of nefarious activity. And so they create the conditions that give rise to tremendous anger and hatred around the world. For example, in Iran, we see the problems in Iran, where a lot of the Iranians do not like the U.S. government. Well, the U.S. officials say, well, it's because they hate America for its freedom and values. It's sort of like the flu, they just hate us, just natural, good old-fashioned hatred. Well, not so. You see, and this is where education comes in, but you're not going to find this in your public schools. You're not going to find this history in your state-supported colleges and universities because it's not the official version, you see. The official version is, the Iranians, when they had their revolution in 1979, took American diplomats hostage. That's where history starts, and by golly, they've hated us ever since. They just hated those diplomats because they just love to hate. Well, the truth of it was that some 25 years before, the CIA, in one of its infamous national security regime change operations, had gone into Iran, instituted a coup, ousted the democratically elected prime minister of the country, a man named Mohammad Mossadegh. He had been Time Magazine's Man of the Year. Everybody in the world knew him. He was highly respected in Iran, highly revered. He was their democratically elected prime minister. The CIA ousts him from power and installs a brutal, unelected dictator. Now, they cite national security, but, never mind that the British had lost their oil interests because Mossadegh had nationalized the oil, something we'd never defend as a libertarian. But, that's the British problem. You go into a foreign country and you establish oil wells and you take your risks. But they came to the CIA and said, please, please, please effect a regime change operation on grounds of national security. Mossadegh's going to be a communist if we keep letting him go on. And so the CIA did it. They did him a favor. And that was the root of the anger, because the CIA didn't just put in this brutal dictator. They also trained his domestic forces, you see, his private army, his private CIA, who proceeded to torture and brutalize the Iranian people for some 25 years. In other words, the Shah was exercising the same powers that the President of the United States assumed after 9/11. He was doing it for 25 years. Power to round up people, the power to torture them, don't give them trials. They're terrorists. You see, they're terrorists. That's what the Shah would say whenever he'd arrest somebody. He's a terrorist, because he had that power, the same power that the president has now post 9/11. And so this is why the Iranian people were so angry and are still angry. I mean, imagine, if the Iranian officials had done that to the United States, 25 years ago. Ousted our president, put in a brutal, unelected dictator. I got a feeling Americans would still be angry about that. That's something hard to forget. And then, after the Soviet Union dismantled and the national security state had lost its official enemy, the Soviet Union, the World War II partner and ally of the U.S., then was converted into an official enemy after the end of the war, where you got this giant national security state, got to protect America from the communists that are going to be here any day, you know. And well, you know, they lost that enemy when the Soviet Union dismantled, and so they started going into the Middle East and also in Latin America with the drug war, poking hornets' nests and doing some really bad things. They intervened in the Persian Gulf War. It's none of their business, and they killed countless Iraqis. That caused a lot of anger. You know, they said, oh, it's, you know, for democracy and all this nonsense. You know, they're supporting dictatorships in the Middle East even to this day, including the Egyptian military dictatorship. And they intentionally destroyed the water and sewage facilities in the country, knowing the effect that this was going to have on people there in terms of infectious illnesses, because they did a report on it before they did the bombing. And they said, now do it. And then they wouldn't let them repair the facilities with all the sanctions and so forth. Children were dying every day for some 11 years. Anger was boiling up. You had troops being stationed on Islamic holy lands. You had the government's unconditional support of the Israeli government, support of dictatorships in the Middle East. I mean, there's this boiling cauldron. And of course, it manifests itself in 9/11, but it was manifesting itself in terrorist attacks before that, the USS Cole. So, in other words, it wasn't about the flu. It wasn't about, oh my gosh, terrorists have just, oh, we just didn't have any idea. Nonsense. A lot of people told them that if they kept going with those policies, there was going to ultimately be not just the terrorist attacks on the USS Cole and the U.S. embassies in East Africa, the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. I mean, there were warning signs, and there were people like Chalmers Johnson. We published op-eds before 9/11 saying, if you don't cease and desist, you're going to have terrorism on American soil. But they didn't cease and desist, and then they come and say, oh, it's like the flu, and now this is, you know, forever. My point here to young people is that this doesn't have to be. You know, they will tell you that this is a permanent state of affairs, that this is how you're going to have to live the rest of your life, with a giant national security state, with the president, you know, rounding up people and torturing them and assassinating them and having these powers, even if he's not doing it to a large extent against Americans, unless the right crisis arises, of course, and then all bets are off. I mean, you know, they're not doing a lot to Americans right now. They're just assassinating a few of them. But that could change. I mean, once the power is ceded to the president, you don't know. I mean, that's what happened in Egypt. I mean, the president there started rounding up dissidents and critics, and you know, the military still won't, you know, give up power that it has there, and these specific dictatorial powers. My point is that you don't have to live like this, okay? That you can restore a limited government republic to our land, and that's the only solution. They will tell you, oh, well, look, we can reform. We promise we'll reform. We won't assassinate as many people anymore. We won't torture as many people. We won't occupy as many countries. We'll just do drug war interventions in Honduras to kill innocent people there, but we'll do it on a very limited basis. Nonsense. Forget reform. That, you know, if you want something grand and glorious, that's what libertarianism's all about. We're not here talking about reform. We're talking about an entirely new paradigm, a constitutionally limited government republic. That was a type of government that was bequeathed to us, and they destroyed that sense of government, you know, with the national security state. And look at all of the results that have flowed from it. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you've also got the out of control spending that we all know about, the debt that is saddling on you, the young people of this country. And so what we want to do, what we libertarians want to do that are in our 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, we want to replace this system. We don't want to reform it. We want to dismantle the entire military overseas empire, the whole military industrial complex. President Eisenhower warned us about that. And then, you know, 30 days after the Kennedy assassination, former President Truman publishes an op-ed in the Washington Post talking about the CIA and how it's turned into this sinister force that was never envisioned when it was brought into existence under his administration. Well, now that the whole excuse for the national security state, the Soviet communist threat, is gone, it's time to dismantle this thing. We should have done it a long time ago, 2 or 3 decades, if not longer, before that. Should never have let it come into existence, really. But this is your solution. You want a peaceful, harmonious society where you don't have TSA goons patting you down and causing you to, to look through what you look like, and you want to get rid of all this stuff, all this junk of the illegal searches, and there's only one solution, and that's libertarianism. Because we're not, unlike the conservatives and the liberals who are trying to, reform or refine, the warfare state. We libertarians want to replace it with a constitutionally limited republic. Now, it's no different on the domestic side. I mean, you look at all the crises we've got in this country, healthcare. Now they'll say, oh, well, gosh, we've just got a healthcare crisis. The freedom in the free market really has its problems. And we can see this in healthcare. And so we've got to get government into this thing to manage the healthcare system, right? And then they have these inane debates over, well, should there be a mandate or should there not be a mandate? Oh, my gosh, I mean, that's going to be the big debate, mandate versus non-mandate. And that's what they're all hyped up about. But what they don't want to recognize is that the whole healthcare crisis has a cause to it. Okay? I mean, it's like, a doctor, he goes in there and he diagnoses a patient. And sometimes the diagnosis is not what the patient wants to hear. Well, the diagnosis for the healthcare crisis that afflicts the American body politic is very simple. The U.S. government is at the root of the problem. Again, you see, it's not just foreign affairs, it's domestic affairs too. The government is the root cause of the healthcare problem. And that's specifically referring to Medicare and Medicaid, where you've got this giant government program, 2 programs there, that came into existence in the 1960s under, liberal Lyndon Johnson, but has been embraced by every conservative president since then, and of course every liberal president. You've got occupational licensure laws that protect doctors from competition from healthcare providers. It's just a big racket. And you've got the insurance regulations that protect, the competition intra-state of insurance firms, where they can't go across state lines to offer insurance because it's all this protection racket from competition. This is a giant interventionist socialist system. Fascist system, really, that's all intertwined, that they call the free market. Yes, you see? And then they say, well, the free market really, it has got its problems because it caused the healthcare crisis, and healthcare costs are soaring, and now we need to get government involved in this to fix the problem. Well, you see, if you don't know any better, then you think, oh, well, gosh, that makes sense. We live in a free market society, and so, yeah, free market's failing, and so I guess we need to, get government involved to solve the problem. What I'm here to tell you is that government policies, the socialist policies, Medicare and Medicaid, the interventionist policies, the regulations, the interventions, they're the root cause of the healthcare problem. And so you can spend your life, as most Americans do. You can look at my generation. Most Americans spend their lives grappling over what's going to be the proper reform. Should there be a mandate or should there not be a mandate? Should there be medical IRAs or should there not be? All this reform nonsense. Or you can spend your life, devoted to ditching this whole system, the interventionist socialist system, repealing Medicare and Medicaid immediately, repealing occupational licensure laws. One of the best essays on this is Milton Friedman's essay on occupational licensure. Just Google it; it's on our website. And he wrote a great essay on why we need to just ditch occupational licensure laws, not just for the shoeshine people and the hairdressers, but also for the lawyers and the doctors and everybody else. I mean, this notion that you got to ask government's permission to make a living, to sustain your life, how do they reconcile that with the principles of economic liberty? Or God-given rights, where you got a right to engage in any enterprise you want, to enter into mutually beneficial trades with others. They can't reconcile it. But my point again is that there's a cause for this stuff, and you got to decide what you want to do with this system. You want to spend your life accepting it, or do you want to spend your life replacing it with a free market, a genuinely free market system, one in which people keep everything they earn, they handle their own health care, they handle their own donations, where there's charity in existence, voluntary charity, instead of this notion that, oh, we've got to force people to be good. Good example of this is Social Security. I mean, this was really the first big socialist program. Well, maybe with the exception of public schooling, on a local basis, that's a socialist program. It's a state mandated, command and control, centrally planned endeavor. No wonder it's such in crisis, government caused again. But Social Security was this notion that we're going to take money from this person and give it to this person. And that's the whole Marxian concept, from each according to ability to each according to need. And it came into existence during the Franklin Roosevelt administration, who, I'm sure you know this, inspired Lyndon Johnson. And it was here during the Roosevelt Revolution that you had this monumental change in the mission of the federal government. The mission of the federal government became to take care of the American people, to take care of us from the cradle to the grave. And this is what Social Security was all about. They took it from the German socialists. That's why, Germany has had Social Security longer than we have. And the whole idea was, oh, well, we're going to take care of people. And when people said, well, why can't children take care of their parents? Why can't the elderly be taken care of through voluntary charity? And they said, well, because American people are bad. They're bad people. And so we need to force them to be good. And that's the whole concept behind this thing. That one, that you're not going to be responsible if you're managing your own money, that you won't take care of your own retirement. And two, that you won't be good and caring. You won't help people. So you got to be forced to do this. Those are the two underlying tenets of the welfare state. Well, no wonder this thing's broke. I mean, they say, oh, there's this trust fund. There's this trust fund. There's no trust fund. There never has been a trust fund. They've spent all the money they've collected. And I know a lot of young people that say, gosh, Social Security's not going to be there when I get there. Blah, 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 blah. Well, of course it'll be there. All you got to do is be willing to do what my generation's getting prepared to do, and what my parents' generation is doing right now. You just got to be willing to steal from your children's generation and from your grandchildren's generation. That's all. That when you get to be 60, 65, 70, you just do the same thing that my generation's doing. You say, Jacob's generation took my money, they stole it from me, and so I'm going to now tax the people that are working. I'm going to do it to them. Now, hey, there may be fewer people to support your funding and the rest of your generation's funding. Just tax your children and your grandchildren's generation 70%, 80% of their income. Go all the way up to 90%. You see, because that's what Social Security is based on. It's based on a plunder system. That when you get up there, you're going to say, well, I want to retaliate because Jacob's generation took my money. They're all dead, so I'm just going to do the same. Well, this thing's got to stop. It's wrong. It's morally wrong to be taking people's money through force like that. And it involves a use of the government to do something that's despicable, to take money from one group of people in order to feather one's own nest or to feather the nest of another human being. That's not what morality is all about. But what I'm here to tell you is there's a cause for this huge mess. No trust fund, just stealing from younger generation. That causes the U.S. government, specifically the socialist system that they brought into existence. So domestically, the situation is the same. That the government's the root cause of this, and there's a solution to it, the libertarian solution. Replace the present system with a free market approach. Just ditch all these programs, repeal Social Security. We've got to start believing in ourselves again. And believing in ourselves is we don't need these programs. And so that's what's exciting about the libertarian movement. When you see all these young people involved in politics and involved in ideological foundations in favor of liberty, it scares them to death because they realize that people are breaking through. And one of the most exciting things I've ever seen is whenever I hear young people saying, I'm influencing my parents to become libertarians. I mean, that's incredible. It's an incredible phenomenon. Well, my point is that if we can combine those of us who are libertarians in my generation, with libertarians that are in their 40s and so forth, with libertarians among the youth, my gosh, we can pull this off. I mean, we can pull this off. We just have to keep building and building and building until we reach a critical mass. And keeping in mind this, if they could bring a socialist, interventionist, fascist system into existence, we can do the reverse. We can get rid of the system, especially given the horrific results. I haven't even talked about the drug war, but there's another example where the government causes the problem and uses an excuse to take away our freedoms. But if they could bring this whole junk into existence, we can bring about its demise and its replacement with a libertarian society. That's the show. Thanks so much for listening in, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Good night.